My wife was cheating on me, and I found out when I caught her secretly chatting with her affair partner late at night. What I did next changed everything. Hey Reddit. I never thought my marriage would come to this. My wife and I had been together for 8 years, married for 6. We met in college and quickly fell in love. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: smart, funny, ambitious, and kind. For years, we were the couple that others looked up to. Friends would tell us they envied our bond, and we wore their admiration like a badge of honor. But life has a way of surprising you. About a year ago, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. At first, it was small things. She started dressing up more often, even on days when she wasn't going anywhere important. She would spend extra time on her makeup, pick out new outfits, and act unusually cheerful. I didn't think much of it after all. People go through phases. Maybe she was trying to boost her confidence or simply enjoyed looking good. Then, the phone habits began. My wife, who used to be an open book with her devices, became protective. Her phone was always by her side, often face down. She started taking it into the bathroom and even to bed, something she never used to do. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off, saying it was work-related and she didn't want to miss any important emails. Her excuses seemed reasonable at the time, but they didn't sit well with me. I chalked it up to my own insecurities and tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I told myself that questioning her too much would make me look paranoid, and I didn't want to come across as controlling. However, the emotional distance between us began to grow. We used to have long conversations about everything: our dreams, plans, even mundane topics like grocery shopping. But lately, our talks had become surface level, almost scripted. Whenever I brought up anything serious, she'd get defensive or distracted, often using her phone as an escape. The red flags became impossible to ignore when she started going out more frequently. Girls' nights, work events, late night meetings, there was always an explanation. I wanted to trust her, but the excuses began piling up. One night, everything came crashing down. It was a Friday, and we had both had long days at work. We ate dinner together, but the conversation was minimal. Afterward, she excused herself, saying she was tired and heading to bed early. I stayed up, watching TV in the living room, trying to unwind. Around midnight, I decided to head to bed myself. When I entered the room, I found the bed empty. I assumed she might be in the bathroom, so I waited a few minutes. But when she didn't return, I started looking for her. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. She was typing furiously, a small smile playing on her lips. I stood there silently for a moment, watching her. My heart sank. She didn't even notice me at first. When I softly called her name, she jumped, quickly locking her phone and fumbling to hide it. "Oh, I couldn't sleep," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Just catching up on some work emails." Her response felt rehearsed, like she had prepared for this moment. I didn't press her. Instead, I nodded and went back to bed, pretending to buy her excuse. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The following day, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I decided to trust my instincts and investigate further. I started paying closer attention to her habits: who she texted, how often she smiled at her phone, and when she chose to leave the room. The more I observed, the more suspicious I became. One evening, while she was in the shower, I finally got the chance to look at her phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, using the passcode I had memorized months ago. What I found shattered me. There were messages between her and someone saved as Amy from work. At first glance, they seemed innocent enough: generic chats about projects and office gossip. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Amy was not Amy. Amy was a man, and their conversations were anything but professional. The messages were explicit, filled with flirtation, compliments, and plans to meet up. They talked about hotels, secret dinners, and moments they had shared. My stomach churned as I realized the extent of her betrayal. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my phone as evidence. For the next few days, I carried the weight of this knowledge alone. I didn't confront her immediately because I needed time to process. I went through waves of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? To us? I sought advice from a close friend, someone I trusted completely. They listened patiently and helped me think through my options. Should I confront her? Should I leave without saying a word? Should I try to work things out? Ultimately, I decided I needed answers. That evening, I asked her to sit down for a serious conversation. She seemed nervous but agreed. I told her I had noticed changes in her behavior and asked her point blank if there was someone else. She denied it immediately, her face a mask of innocence. When I showed her the screenshots, her demeanor changed. She looked stunned, like a deer caught in headlights. At first, she tried to deny everything, claiming the messages were taken out of context. But as I read the explicit parts aloud, her excuses crumbled. She broke down in tears, apologizing profusely and begging for forgiveness. She swore it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, and that she still loved me. I listened to her pleas, but I couldn't find it in myself to forgive her. The trust was gone, and without trust, a marriage is just an empty shell. I told her I needed time to think and left the house. Over the next few weeks, I stayed with a friend while we sorted through the aftermath. She kept trying to reach out, sending long messages and calling incessantly, but I didn't respond. My mind was made up. Eventually, we filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy process, but it was necessary. Looking back, I realize how much I had ignored the red flags, convincing myself that our marriage was unshakable. Now, months later, I'm in a better place. I've started focusing on myself, rediscovering hobbies, and rebuilding my life. It's not easy, but every day feels a little lighter. If you're reading this and going through something similar, remember this: you deserve love, respect, and honesty. Don't settle for anything less. Update. After discovering the affair and confronting my wife, I decided to leave the house temporarily. I moved in with my close friend Matt, who was incredibly supportive during this ordeal. He gave me space to vent, listened without judgment, and reminded me that I didn't have to rush any decisions. The days that followed were emotionally draining. I found myself constantly replaying our confrontation in my mind, wondering if I had done something to push her away. I kept oscillating between anger and sadness, struggling to make sense of everything. While at Matt's place, I started journaling my thoughts. Writing down my feelings helped me organize the chaos in my mind. I realized that I wasn't just mourning the betrayal, I was mourning the version of my wife I thought I knew and the future we had planned together. Meanwhile, my wife kept trying to contact me. She sent long messages every day, apologizing and begging me to come home. She claimed the affair was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, and that it didn't mean anything. She promised to cut off all contact with her affair partner and attend therapy to work on herself. I didn't respond. I needed time to figure out what I wanted, and I didn't trust her words at that moment. During this time, I also consulted a therapist. I knew that navigating the aftermath of an affair would require more than just advice from friends. My therapist helped me focus on my emotions and reassured me that it was okay to feel conflicted. One thing she said stuck with me: trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and a lifetime to repair if it can even be repaired at all. Another update. About a week after our confrontation, I decided to return to the house to pick up some of my belongings. I informed her ahead of time, and she promised she wouldn't be there, giving me the space I needed. Walking into our home was surreal. It no longer felt like the safe, comforting place it used to be. Every corner held memories, and it was painful to realize how much had changed in such a short time. While packing, I stumbled upon something that sent my emotions spiraling all over again: a journal tucked away in her nightstand. I hesitated but decided to read it. The entries were sporadic but revealing. In one of them, she wrote about meeting the man she was having an affair with. She described him as someone who made her feel alive again, someone who brought excitement into her life. But what stung the most was her justification. She wrote that she felt neglected and unappreciated in our marriage. Reading that hurt more than I expected. I had always tried to be a good husband, but maybe I'd failed in ways I hadn't realized. Still, I couldn't understand how her response to feeling neglected was to betray me instead of talking to me about it. I also found receipts for hotel stays and gifts she had purchased for him. These weren't things she had admitted to during our confrontation. It became clear that the affair wasn't just an emotional connection, it was physical too. That night, I sent her a message. I told her I had found her journal and the receipts and that her lies were unraveling even more. She responded with a lengthy apology, saying she hadn't wanted to hurt me further by admitting the full truth. She reiterated her willingness to do whatever it took to fix our marriage, but by this point, I was losing hope. I shared everything with Matt and my therapist. Both encouraged me to focus on what I wanted, not what she claimed she could offer. Final update. After several weeks of separation, therapy, and soul-searching, I made my decision. I realized that while I still loved my wife, I couldn't rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Her actions had created a chasm between us that felt impossible to bridge. I called her and asked to meet in person. We sat down at a cafe, and for the first time since our confrontation, we had a calm, honest conversation. I told her that I couldn't continue the marriage. While I appreciated her apologies and willingness to change, I knew deep down that I would always question her loyalty. She broke down crying, but this time, I didn't feel compelled to comfort her. I stayed firm in my decision. I told her I was filing for divorce and that we needed to start discussing logistics like dividing assets and figuring out what to do with the house. The divorce process was difficult but relatively amicable. She agreed to my terms, and we sold the house, splitting the proceeds. I moved into a small apartment, focusing on rebuilding my life. Over the next few months, I worked on myself. I continued therapy, picked up hobbies I had neglected, and reconnected with old friends. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. As for my ex-wife, I heard through mutual friends that she was struggling to move on. She had tried reaching out to me a few times, but I decided it was best for both of us to maintain no contact. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. The betrayal was a turning point in my life, forcing me to reevaluate not only my relationship but also what I wanted for my future. I've learned to value my own happiness and to set boundaries that protect my emotional well-being. Final thoughts. This journey has been painful, but it has also been transformative. I've learned that healing is not a linear process and that it's okay to feel lost sometimes. The key is to keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. For anyone going through something similar, I want you to know this: you are not alone. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to define you. With time, patience, and self-love, you can rebuild your life and find peace again.